Jacob Miller stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber and felt the weight of 400 pairs of alien eyes watching him. Some of those eyes were compound and reflected light in strange ways. Others glowed with their own internal fire. A few species didn't have eyes at all but sensed him through methods he couldn't begin to understand. None of that mattered right now. What mattered was the document floating in holographic form above the central podium. The document that would end humanity's freedom. He had read it 3 times already, hoping he had misunderstood something. But the words were clear. The Galactic Council wanted complete control over all human worlds. They wanted every human citizen registered in their genetic database. They wanted Earth's military forces disbanded and folded into Council command. They called it integration. Jacob called it surrender. For 3 years, humanity had worked alongside the Council. Human engineers had improved their stations. Human doctors had saved countless alien lives. Human soldiers had fought and died pushing back the Void Swarm, the parasitic entities that consumed entire worlds. Humanity had given everything they had to prove themselves worthy partners in the galactic community. And this was their reward. Speaker Thelnora rose from her seat at the high table. She was a being of living crystal, 12 feet tall, her body refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns on the walls. When she spoke, her voice resonated like singing glass. Ambassador Miller, humanity has been given a great honor. Full integration into the Council structure will bring your species prosperity beyond imagination. You will have access to technologies that could cure every disease. Your people will never know hunger or want. All we ask in return is your cooperation and your trust. Jacob kept his voice steady. And our freedom? Our right to govern ourselves? Thelnora's light dimmed slightly. Freedom is a primitive concept. The Council operates on principles of collective benefit. Individual species' rights are secondary to the greater good of all. That's a no then. Jacob looked around the chamber. Let me be clear about what you're asking. You want us to give up our independence. You want us to submit to laws we had no part in creating. You want us to trust you with complete power over our lives and our children's lives. Is that correct? A Corvin delegate, his scales gleaming blue-black under the lights, stood up. Your tone is disrespectful, human. The Council has offered you a place at the table of civilized species. You should be grateful. Jacob felt something cold settle in his chest. He recognized it. It was the same feeling his grandfather had described, the feeling that came right before you realized a friendship had been a lie all along. Grateful, he repeated slowly, for the privilege of giving up everything we are. Thelnora raised one crystalline hand. A vote will be called. All species of the Council will decide whether humanity's integration proceeds under the terms outlined. Those in favor signal now. Lights began appearing across the chamber. Blue lights, green lights, purple lights. Each one represented a species voting yes. Jacob watched them multiply, spreading like fire across the vast room. His aide, Sophie Green, stood beside him with her tablet, counting silently. When the lights finally stopped appearing, Sophie looked up at him. Her face was pale. 417 votes in favor, sir. 0 against. The chamber fell silent. Jacob took a slow breath. He had prepared for this possibility, hoped it wouldn't come to it, but prepared nonetheless. Then humanity thanks the Galactic Council for the past 3 years. We have learned much from you. We hope, in our small way, we have contributed something of value in return. You accept the terms? Thelnora sounded surprised. No. Jacob's voice carried across the chamber clearly. We reject them. Humanity will begin immediate withdrawal from all Council territories and operations. All treaties between Earth and the Council are hereby concluded. All joint operations will be terminated within the standard 30-day period. We came to the stars hoping to find friends and equals. We have found something else instead. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. Some demanded clarification. Others called for security. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Krell of the Voxian Empire pushed through the crowd toward Jacob. His tentacles waved in agitation. You cannot be serious. Humanity needs the Council. You have no standing in the galaxy without us. Jacob met his gaze calmly. Then we will learn to stand on our own. The Void Swarm will destroy you, Krell insisted. Without Council protection, your worlds are defenseless. We've been fighting the Swarm for 3 years, Sophie interjected quietly. We know how they work. We'll manage. This is madness. Theleonora's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Reconsider, Ambassador Miller. Isolation will doom your species. Jacob shook his head. You misunderstand. This isn't about pride or anger. This is about principle. Humanity will not trade freedom for safety. We will not surrender our right to self-determination for promises of prosperity. If the Council cannot accept us as equal partners, then we respectfully remove ourselves from the arrangement. He touched his comm device. Captain Foster, begin evacuation protocols. All human personnel and assets are to withdraw from Council space immediately. The response came instantly. Understood, Ambassador. Initiating now. Across the galaxy, the orders went out. On space stations and colony worlds, on ships and outposts, humans began packing. They moved with quiet efficiency, no panic, no drama. They had been taught to follow orders, and the orders were clear. Leave. On the trade station, Meridian Point, Chief Engineer Danny Hayes shut down the primary reactor he had spent 2 years improving. The station's alien crew watched in confusion as human technicians carefully removed every piece of equipment they had installed, every upgrade they had made. Within hours, the station's efficiency dropped by 40%. On the medical frigate Mercy Wing, Dr. Karen Wells encrypted her research files and transferred them to secured human servers. Her breakthrough work on cross-species pathogen treatment had saved thousands of lives. The Council had assumed that research would remain available to them. They were wrong. On the colony world New Seattle, Governor Paul Wright addressed 30,000 human settlers. Many had built lives there. They had alien friends, alien neighbors. Some had even married into alien families. The choice he offered them was brutal in its simplicity. Come home to human space or stay and live under Council law. Most chose to leave. Captain Ryan Foster stood on the bridge of the carrier Valiant Dawn and coordinated the largest evacuation in human history. 243 ships, over 3 million people, thousands of tons of equipment and supplies. It was a logistical nightmare, but Ryan had good people under his command. Navigation, plot jump coordinates for the Frontier Cluster, he ordered. Communications, send message to all human vessels. We leave together. No one gets left behind. His second officer, Lisa Chen, looked up from her console. Sir, we're receiving multiple hails from Council representatives. They want to negotiate. Tell them negotiations concluded when they held their vote. Ryan's voice was firm. We gave them a choice. They made it. Now we're making ours. On Earth, President Helen Davis stood before the cameras and addressed both humanity and the galaxy beyond. Her message was brief. 3 years ago, we reached out to the stars with open hands and open hearts. We offered friendship, cooperation, and partnership. Today we learned that what the Galactic Council wanted was not a partner but a servant. Humanity does not kneel. We came in peace. We leave in peace, but we leave. The transmission ended. Within 30 days, every human had withdrawn from Council space. Every station stood empty of human presence. Every ship had jumped to coordinates beyond Council territory. The withdrawal was so complete, so absolute, that it felt like humanity had never been there at all. Except for the problems that began appearing almost immediately. Shield generators started failing. Medical centers couldn't treat certain diseases. Military tactics that had worked for 3 years suddenly resulted in devastating losses. Trade agreements collapsed. Diplomatic channels went silent. And in the Council chambers, as the delegates gathered to discuss the unexpected crisis, someone finally asked the question no one had wanted to voice. What had they just done? Captain Ryan Foster watched the view screen as another human cargo vessel entered formation with the evacuation fleet. That made 198 ships accounted for, 45 more to go. Around him, the bridge crew of the Valiant Dawn worked with focused intensity. No wasted movements, no unnecessary chatter, just professionals doing their jobs under pressure. Captain, the Meridian Point demolition is complete, reported Lisa Chen from her navigation station. Chief Hayes reports all human-designed systems have been removed and the station has been returned to baseline functionality. Ryan nodded. Baseline meant the station now operated at about half its previous efficiency. But that wasn't humanity's problem anymore. The Council had made their decision. Humanity was simply following through. Any update from the New Seattle evacuation? Governor Wright reports final shuttles launching within the hour. All colonists who chose to leave are accounted for. Ryan felt a weight in his chest. Not all the colonists had chosen to leave. Some had built entire lives on New Seattle. They had married aliens, had children with them. Those families faced an impossible choice, and many had chosen to stay together rather than evacuate. He understood the decision, but it still hurt to leave people behind. Incoming transmission from Voxian Ambassador Krell, the communications officer announced. Audio only. Put him through. The ambassador's voice crackled over the speakers, translated by the universal language processor. Captain Foster, this action is completely irrational. There are treaties in place, trade agreements that span decades. You cannot simply abandon everything. Ryan kept his voice neutral and professional. Ambassador, the Council voted unanimously to impose terms humanity could not accept. We are withdrawing, as is our right under galactic law. All existing treaties will be honored through their completion dates, after which they will not be renewed. All trade contracts will be fulfilled. We are breaking no laws and violating no agreements. But the war effort against the Void Swarm, Krell's voice rose in pitch. Your military strategies have been essential to our success. Without human tactical support, the war is your concern now, Ryan interrupted. Humanity wishes the Council success in their future operations. Foster out. He cut the transmission before Krell could respond. There was no point in further discussion. The decision had been made at levels far above his rank. His job was simple. Get every human safely out of Council space. Across 70 different star systems, the exodus continued. In the medical facility on Station Epsilon, Dr. Karen Wells supervised the evacuation of her research team. 32 human doctors and scientists packed their equipment and files. The alien medical staff watched with growing anxiety. A Pelthon physician approached Karen, his forearms gesturing in distress. Dr. Wells, please. Your research on the broad-spectrum pathogen filter. It has saved thousands of lives across dozens of species. You cannot take that knowledge away. Karen finished securing a data chip and looked at him. She had worked alongside this physician for 18 months. They had saved lives together, published papers together. She considered him a friend. The Council decided they didn't need humanity as partners, she said quietly. That's their choice. But my research is my work. I will not give it to people who see me as a subordinate, rather than an equal. People will die without that research. Then perhaps the Council should have thought of that before they voted. Karen's voice was sad but firm. She picked up her final case and walked toward the docking bay. Behind her, the Pelthon physician stood alone among the empty laboratory stations. On the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, human farmers dismantled the irrigation systems they had designed. The local Zephon population gathered to watch, confused and frightened. These systems had tripled crop yields. Without them, food shortages were inevitable. Elder Morphin approached the human agricultural supervisor, a woman named Beth Carter. Please help us understand. Why are you taking these systems away? Have we offended you somehow? Beth knelt down to the elder's level. The Zephon were small, gentle beings who had welcomed the human farmers with genuine warmth. This was one of the hardest goodbyes. You've done nothing wrong, Beth assured him. The Council in their great wisdom decided humanity needed to be controlled. We disagreed, so we're leaving. I'm sorry. I truly am. But we can't stay where we're not wanted as equals. The Council does not speak for the Zephon, Morphin said urgently. We want you to stay, please. Beth felt tears forming but blinked them back. I know, but Council law applies to all member worlds. If we stay, we submit to their authority. We can't do that. Take care of yourself, old friend. And remember, if your people ever need humanity, find a way to call us. We won't forget the Zephon kindness. She stood and returned to her work. Behind her, Morphin watched with sorrow in his large eyes. The military withdrawal was even more complex. Human soldiers had been embedded in Council defense forces throughout the frontier. They had trained alien troops, planned operations, and fought side by side against the Void Swarm. Now they packed their gear and prepared to leave. Lieutenant Commander Jack Peterson stood in the briefing room of Forward, Base Talon, and addressed his mixed human-alien unit. This is our last day together. I want you all to know it's been an honor serving alongside you. You're good soldiers, every one of you. A young Corvin officer stood up. Commander, I don't understand. We're a team. We've fought together, bled together. How can you just leave? Jack chose his words carefully. The Council decided humanity needed to be controlled. My government decided we couldn't accept that. I follow orders. Those orders say go home. So I'm going home. But the swarm is still out there. Yes, and you'll fight them. You've learned well. Trust your training and trust each other. You'll do fine. The Corvin officer shook his head. Without human tactical innovation, we'll be using the same strategies the swarm has learned to counter. Our casualty rates will increase. Jack had no answer for that. He simply nodded once and left the room. His duty was to his own people now. On ships and stations throughout Council space, the scene repeated. Humans said their goodbyes. Some farewells were warm. Others were bitter. Many were simply confused. The aliens didn't understand why humanity was leaving. Most had never even heard about the Council's vote. They only knew that their human friends and colleagues were suddenly packing up and going away. Governor Paul Wright of New Seattle spent his last day on the planet visiting families who had chosen to stay. Most were mixed marriages. Human spouses who couldn't bear to leave their alien partners and children. He met with Jennifer Cole, a human woman married to a Zephon artisan. Their 3 children played in the yard, hybrid offspring with features of both species. Are you sure about this? Paul asked her. Once we leave, you'll be under council law. The new regulations will apply to you. Jennifer looked at her children, then at her husband. I'm sure. My family is here. I can't abandon them. We'll find a way to manage. Paul clasped her hand. If you ever need help, send a message to the frontier territories. Humanity won't forget our people who stayed behind. As the sun set on New Seattle, the last evacuation shuttle lifted off. Paul watched the planet shrink in the viewport, knowing he would likely never see it again. 30,000 humans had lived there. 22,000 were coming with him. 8,000 had chosen to stay. The final count came in 3 days later. All human personnel had evacuated Council space. 243 ships carrying over 3 million people were now beyond Council borders. The withdrawal had cost them nothing in human lives, but it had cost them homes, friendships, and years of work building relationships with alien species. Ryan stood on the bridge as the last ship entered formation. All vessels accounted for, Captain, Lisa reported. Fleet is ready for jump to the frontier cluster. Then let's go home, Ryan said quietly. Navigation, initiate jump sequence. All ships execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. The fleet jumped as one. 243 human vessels vanished from Council space in a blaze of exotic radiation. Behind them, they left empty stations, silent laboratories, and abandoned facilities. And in the Council military headquarters, alarms began sounding. The Void Swarm was attacking, and for the first time in 3 years, the Council had to face them alone. The results were not good. Admiral Jex of the Corvin Defense Fleet had fought in 43 battles against the Void Swarm. He had won 39 of them. Those victories had earned him command of the Council's frontier defense forces and the respect of warriors across a dozen species. Now floating in the wreckage of his command ship, bleeding from multiple wounds, he dictated what would be his final report. This is Admiral Jex. The swarm attacked with standard behavior patterns, but our defensive formations failed to repel them. They knew exactly where our weak points would appear. They anticipated every tactical adjustment. 17 minutes from first contact to fleet destruction. I've never seen casualties this severe. It's like they learned all our patterns and adapted specifically to counter them. His recording device captured one last, labored breath before the emergency. Pod systems registered his death. The attack had come 3 weeks after humanity's departure. A swarm assault on a mining operation in the Tertius sector. What should have been a routine defense turned into a massacre. Of the 40 Council ships that responded, only 6 survived. The mining facility and everyone on it were consumed by the swarm. In the Council Military Command Center, Fleet Commander Veloth studied the tactical records of the battle. Her tentacles moved rapidly across the holographic controls, pulling up data from previous engagements. The pattern she found made her feel cold despite her species' natural resistance to temperature. Changes. She called an emergency meeting with the War Council. Here are our engagement records for the past 3 years. Veloth projected the data above the conference table. Green markers indicated victories. Red markers indicated defeats or heavy losses. Notice the distribution. Victories cluster around human-led operations or battles where human tactical doctrine was employed. Our own traditional strategies show a 63% failure rate. Council Speaker Thel Nora studied the display. And human strategies? 91% success rate. Silence filled the room. A Pelthon general leaned forward. You're saying we became dependent on human military thinking without realizing it. I'm saying humans think differently than we do, Veloth replied. The swarm is a hive intelligence. It learns patterns quickly and adapts. Our species favor organization, hierarchy, and proven methods. The swarm learned to predict us within months. But humans, they're chaotic, unpredictable. They improvise and innovate constantly. The swarm couldn't learn to counter them because human tactics were never the same twice. Then we adapt, Thelnora said. We learn to think like humans. Veloth's tentacles drooped in a gesture of doubt. With respect, Speaker, you can't teach that. It's not about training. It's about fundamental cultural differences. Humans reward individual initiative. They celebrate creative problem solving. They encourage questioning orders when the situation changes. Our cultures don't work that way. We can't simply decide to think like humans any more than they could decide to think like us. The military crisis was only the beginning. In the medical centers across Council space, Chief Physician Torak of the Central Hospital received an urgent report. A plague had broken out on 3 core worlds simultaneously. The pathogen was jumping between species, something that should have been impossible. The broad-spectrum filters designed by Dr. Karen Wells should have caught. Torak rushed to the filtration control room and found technicians staring helplessly at the malfunctioning equipment. What's the status? Torak demanded. The head technician, a crystalline being named Shex, gestured at the readouts. The harmonic resonance is degrading. We've tried recalibrating, but we don't understand the underlying principles. Dr. Wells designed this system. We only know how to maintain it when it's working properly. We don't know how to fix it when it breaks. There must be documentation. She encrypted her research files before she left. What documentation remains is incomplete. The plague spread. Hospitals filled beyond capacity. Death tolls climbed into the thousands, then tens of thousands. Physicians who had trained their entire lives to treat their own species found themselves helpless against a disease that ignored the rules of biology they understood. The economic collapse was slower but equally devastating. The Traders Guild met in emergency session as reports flooded in from across Council space. Trade between species was grinding to a halt. Ambassador Yeln of the Guild stood before a holographic display showing collapsing commerce routes. The problem is complex, Yeln explained to the assembled merchants. Humans served as intermediaries between species with incompatible biology or culture. For example, the Corvin and the Gelthan cannot share the same atmospheric conditions. Humans could work with both. Now Corvin merchants won't travel to Gelthan worlds and vice versa. Trade volume between them has dropped 92%. Hire translators, someone suggested. Use technology. We do use technology. But humans understood context in ways our translation software doesn't capture. They knew when a Pelthon silence meant agreement versus offense. They recognized Zephon commercial gestures that looked identical to outsiders, but meant completely different things. That knowledge left with them. Within 6 weeks of humanity's departure, interspecies trade had dropped by 40%. Economic projections predicted complete collapse. Within the year if the trend continued. The shield failures began appearing around the same time. Chief, Engineer Bolton watched helplessly as the defensive shields, protecting the industrial world of Praxis, flickered and died for the 3rd time that week. Each restart cycle risked cascading failures throughout the planetary grid. This doesn't make sense, Bolton said, reviewing the technical logs. The generators are functioning normally. Power flow is optimal. But the harmonic resonance keeps collapsing. His assistant pulled up older records. Sir, these shields were upgraded 2 years ago. The upgrade was designed by human engineer Greg Palmer. He implemented a resonance system that prevented shield collapse under sustained bombardment. Can we reverse the upgrade? The upgrade is integrated throughout the entire defensive grid. Removing it would require rebuilding the shield network from scratch. That would take months and leave the planet defenseless. Bolton stared at the failing shields and felt genuine fear. Without proper defenses, Praxis was vulnerable to both the Void Swarm and common raiders. Try to contact this Palmer. Offer him whatever he wants to consult. The message was sent but received no response. Greg Palmer, like all humans, was gone. In the council chambers, the emergency sessions never seemed to end. Speaker Thelnora found herself facing angry delegates demanding answers she didn't have. Ambassador Krell stood and addressed the assembly. We must face reality. The Council needs humanity. Our military cannot defend against the swarm without their tactical expertise. Our medical system is failing. Our economy is collapsing. We must recall them and offer revised terms. Revised terms, Thelnora repeated bitterly. You mean surrender to their demands. I mean recognize that we made an error. The debate raged for hours, but everyone knew the truth. The Council had gambled that humanity needed them more than they needed humanity. The reality was proving to be exactly opposite. But there was another problem. Even if the Council admitted their mistake, even if they offered humanity anything they wanted, would humans even care? The answer came the next day from an unexpected source. Elder Morphin of the Zethon people addressed the Council. His small frame seemed even smaller standing before the assembly, but his voice carried clearly. For generations, my people and 71 other minor species have held little influence in Council decisions. The major powers vote, and we follow. Humanity was different. They treated us as equals. They valued our perspectives. Ambassador Miller spent as much time with Zephon delegates as he did with Corvin or Pelthon representatives. Now you want humanity back because you need them. I must ask the question, do you deserve them? The chamber fell silent. Thelnora's crystalline form flickered with what might have been shame. Elder Morphin, I understand your point, but with respect, Speaker, I don't believe you do. You offered humanity subjugation and called it integration. You dismissed their concerns as primitive thinking. You assumed they needed you. Now that you've learned otherwise, you wish to correct your mistake. But a mistake is an accident. What you did was deliberate. You voted unanimously to control them. Every single species in this chamber agreed they should submit to your authority. Morphin paused and looked around the chamber. Perhaps the question is not whether humanity will return, but whether this council is capable of the change necessary to deserve their return. He left the podium without waiting for a response. That night, Thelnora stood alone in her private chambers, reviewing the past 3 months. The military defeats, the plague deaths, the economic collapse, the shield failures. Every crisis pointed back to the same source. Humanity had been the glue holding the council together, and no one had realized it until that glue was gone. She composed a message to be transmitted to the last known coordinates of the human fleet. Every word was chosen carefully, every phrase crafted to convey respect and acknowledgement of error. When it was done, she sent it and waited for a response. The answer, when it finally came 5 days later, was brief and devastating in its simplicity. The second message to humanity took 7 days to compose. Every delegate wanted input. Every word was debated and analyzed for possible misinterpretation. The result was a masterwork of diplomatic language that tried to invite humanity back, without actually admitting the council had been wrong. Speaker, Thelnora reviewed the final version and felt a strange mixture of hope and doubt. The message was perfect by council standards. Whether it would work with humans was another matter entirely. She sent it personally, encoding it with her own security signature to show the communication's importance. 5 days passed with no response. On the 6th day, a reply arrived. Thelnora opened it immediately, hope rising in her crystalline chest. The message was 4 sentences long. Message received. Humanity appreciates the Council's continued interest in our welfare. However, we are currently satisfied with our independent status. We wish the Council success in resolving its current challenges. Thelnora read it 3 times, searching for hidden meaning or room for negotiation. She found none. The message was polite, professional, and completely final. In the council chambers, she shared the response with the assembled delegates. The silence that followed was profound. Ambassador Krell finally spoke, his tentacles drooping. They're not coming back. Nobody argued with him. The Void Swarm intensified their attacks as if sensing weakness. 6 colony worlds fell in rapid succession. The council fleets, attempting to use captured human tactical data, suffered catastrophic losses. They had the information but lacked the understanding of how to adapt those tactics to changing battlefield conditions. Refugee ships flooded the core systems. Hospitals already overwhelmed by the plague now struggled with wounded from the swarm attacks. The economic crisis deepened as trade routes collapsed under the pressure of war and disease. The council was dying. Fleet Commander. Veloth stood in the war room and watched another defensive position fall on the tactical display. 12 ships destroyed. A colony of 40,000 consumed by the swarm. She had run out of ideas and was rapidly running out of hope. "We need human tactical advisors," a junior officer said quietly. "They're not coming," Veloth replied. "We asked. They declined. There are humans who stayed, the ones who married into alien families." Veloth considered this. It was true that several thousand humans had chosen to remain in Council space for personal reasons. They were technically Council citizens now, subject to Council law. But would they help? She sent out inquiries. Most ignored her messages. A few responded with polite refusals. One, a human woman named Nina Hayes, married to a Corvin officer named Zell, agreed to meet. Nina arrived at military headquarters with her husband beside her. She was in her mid-30s, lean and fit, with the bearing of someone who had spent time in combat. Veloth's research showed Nina had been a tactical officer in the human fleet before retiring to marry Zell. "Thank you for coming," Veloth said. "We need help." Nina looked around the war room, studying the tactical displays. "You're trying to copy human tactics from recorded data. Yes, it's not working. Of course it's not working. You're missing the entire point." Nina walked to one of the displays showing a recent battle. "Here, you formed a standard defensive sphere and rotated firing patterns every 12 seconds. That's based on a tactic Captain Foster used at the Battle of Kepler Station. But Foster only used that formation because he was defending a fixed position with limited maneuverability. You tried to use the same formation in open space against a mobile swarm force. It failed because the context was completely different." "We followed the tactical manual exactly," a Corvin officer protested. "That's the problem," Nina said sharply. "Humans don't fight by manuals. We use principles and adapt them to the situation. You can't learn that from a database." Veloth leaned forward. "Then teach us, please. People are dying." Nina looked at her husband. Zell nodded slightly. She turned back to Veloth. "Even if I wanted to help, it wouldn't solve your problem. This isn't about tactics. It's about culture. Humanity celebrates individual initiative. We reward people who think outside the box. We encourage junior officers to question senior officers if they have a better idea. Your species? You value hierarchy and proven methods. There's nothing wrong with that, but it means you'll never fight the way we do. You can't train someone to be creative when their entire culture teaches them to follow orders and trust established procedures." "Then what do we do?" Veloth asked and heard the desperation in her own voice. "Stop trying to be human. Find your own strengths." Nina studied the tactical displays again. "You have excellent coordination. Your species work together better than humans ever could. You're patient. You're methodical. Use that. Stop trying to be unpredictable and instead be overwhelming. Mass your forces. Use numerical superiority. Grind the swarm down through sheer persistence. That will result in higher casualties. Yes, but you'll survive, which is better than what you're doing now." Nina left shortly after, declining any formal position with the military, but her advice proved sound. The Council forces stopped trying to copy human tactics and returned to their own traditional methods, enhanced with the hard lessons learned from recent defeats. The casualty rates remained high, but the swarm advance slowed. Meanwhile, the plague continued to ravage Council worlds. The death toll exceeded 200 million with no end in sight. In desperation, Council medical authorities sent a direct plea to Dr. Karen Wells, transmitted to the human frontier territories. Karen received the message in her laboratory on the human colony world of New Haven. She read it twice, then sat in silence for long minutes. Her assistant, a young doctor named Andy Cole, watched her carefully. "What are you thinking?" Andy asked. "They want the pathogen filter specifications. Full technical data to manufacture and calibrate the systems. Are you going to give it to them?" Karen stood and walked to the window. Outside, New Haven was thriving. Human colonists building new lives in a system far from Council space, free from Council regulations, free from Council demands. "People are dying," she said quietly. "Children, families, yes, the Council was wrong. Yes, they treated us badly. But do I let innocents die because their leaders made mistakes?" "That's your call," Andy said. "No one would blame you for refusing." Karen made her decision. She transmitted the complete technical specifications for the pathogen filter to the Council. Freely and without conditions, she included a brief note. "Medicine should never be a political tool. Use this information to save lives. That's all that matters." The Council medical centers received the data and immediately began implementing the filter systems. Within weeks, the plague was contained. Within months, it was eliminated. The death toll stopped climbing. Speaker Thelnora wanted to send a formal thank you, but her advisors suggested it might be unwelcome. Instead, she had Karen's actions broadcast across Council space. The message was clear without words. Humanity had left when insulted, but they hadn't abandoned basic compassion. The contrast with the Council's treatment of humanity was not lost on anyone. A third message was sent to humanity. This one was different. Thelnora wrote it herself without diplomatic advisors or committee reviews. It was brief and direct. We were wrong. We disrespected you. We underestimated you. We attempted to control you when we should have partnered with you. The Council offers its sincere apology and invites humanity to return as full and equal partners with complete autonomy. We understand if you decline, but know that we have learned from our mistakes, and we deeply regret the harm caused by our actions. The response came within hours. Humanity appreciates the Council's apology and recognizes the difficult circumstances you face. However, we have found our current situation satisfactory. We are prosperous, at peace, and governed by our own laws. We have no desire to re-enter an arrangement that required our exile to be appreciated. We respectfully decline your invitation. There was a second paragraph. Should the Council face an existential threat it cannot overcome alone, you may petition humanity for assistance. We will evaluate such requests individually. Understand that any aid provided will be temporary and will not constitute renewed membership in the Council. Humanity's independence is not negotiable. The message was signed by President Helen Davis herself. Thelnora read it in her chambers and felt something she had never experienced before. Not defeat exactly, but humbling. Complete and total humbling. The Council had believed themselves superior. They had believed humanity needed them. Both assumptions had proven catastrophically wrong, and now, having learned the truth, they had to live with the consequences. The Council would survive. The swarm advance had been halted using traditional tactics. The plague was eliminated thanks to Karen's generosity. Shield systems were slowly being rebuilt using pre-human designs, less efficient but functional. They would survive, but they were diminished, smaller, weaker, and they had no one to blame but themselves. In the Council chambers, Thelnora had a human phrase translated and inscribed on the wall, where every delegate would see it daily. You don't know what you have until it's gone. The Council had learned that lesson in the most expensive way possible. The price of their pride was measured in millions of lives, countless ships, and the permanent loss of the most innovative species they had ever. 8 months had passed since humanity's departure from Council space. Admiral Ryan Foster stood in the observation deck of Unity Station, the new hub of human civilization in the frontier territories. The station floated in the heart of a star cluster. Humanity had been quietly settling for years, far from Council borders. Through the massive viewport, he could see dozens of ships coming and going, bringing supplies, colonists, and trade goods between the growing network of human worlds. Reports from New Haven, Liberty, and Prosperity colonies are all positive. Sir? Sophie Green said, reviewing data on her tablet. She had followed Ryan through the evacuation and now served as his chief of staff. Population growth is steady. No major incidents. The independent trade networks are functioning smoothly. Ryan nodded, watching a cargo hauler dock with the station's port arm. And the Council? Stable, apparently. They stopped the swarm advance using mass tactics. Higher casualties than they had with our help, but effective. The plague is eliminated thanks to Dr. Wells sharing her research. They're recovering, but slowly. Any new contact attempts? Nothing official. Though we're getting individual requests from various Council species. The Zephon want to establish a trade agreement. The Pelthon are asking about cultural exchange programs. Even the Corvin have inquired about purchasing some of our agricultural technology. Ryan considered this. Those are individual species requests, not Council requests. Exactly. They're reaching out to us directly, bypassing the Council entirely. What's President Davis's position? Evaluate each request individually. Accept those that benefit us and align with our values. Reject any that might compromise our independence. It was a good policy. Humanity wasn't interested in isolation, just independence. If individual alien species wanted to work with humans on equal terms, there was no reason to refuse. The first successful agreement came from the Zephon. Elder Morphin himself traveled to Unity Station to negotiate. Ryan met him in one of the diplomatic suites, and the old being's joy at seeing humans again was obvious. "My friends," Morphin said, his large eyes shining, "it gladdens my heart to see you thriving." "And you, Elder," Ryan replied warmly. "What brings you all this way?" "Business, sadly, though I wish it were purely pleasure." The Zephan wished to establish formal trade relations with humanity, independent of the Council. "We offer agricultural products, artisan goods, and certain rare minerals your colonies need. In exchange, we hope to purchase your irrigation technology and medical supplies." Ryan smiled. "I think we can work something out." The agreement was signed within days. It was modest in scale, but symbolically important. The Zephan became the first Council species to formally recognize humanity's independent status and establish direct relations. Others followed. The Pelthon negotiated for human-built medical scanners. A coalition of minor species requested human arbitrators for trade disputes, valuing their neutral perspective. Even some of the major species began quiet negotiations, though they were careful to keep these discussions private to avoid Council disapproval. Humanity was building a new network of relationships, one based on mutual respect rather than political hierarchy. President Helen Davis stood before the press in her office on Earth, fielding questions about these new developments. A reporter from the frontier territories asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Madam President, with these individual agreements in place and the Council clearly interested in renewed contact, will humanity consider rejoining the Council?" Helen took a moment before answering. "The Council taught humanity an important lesson. We learned that we don't need the validation of others to know our worth. We left the Council not in anger but in dignity. We've built something new here, something that belongs to us. Could we rejoin the Council? Perhaps if they offered true partnership and complete respect for our sovereignty. But we're in no hurry. We're quite content building our own future. What about the species we left behind? The Council worlds that depended on our help? Individual species can reach out to us as many have. We'll help where we can on terms that respect both sides. But we won't return to a system that tried to control us. The price of the Council's pride was high. We won't let them repeat that mistake." The interview was broadcast across both human space and Council territories. The message was clear. Humanity was open to cooperation but not to subordination. In the Council chambers, Thelnora watched the broadcast and felt a complex mixture of emotions. Regret for what had been lost, respect for what humanity had become, and grudging acceptance of the new reality. The Council had recovered from the crisis, but they were changed. 24 colony worlds had been permanently abandoned to the swarm. The economic output remained 40% below pre-Exodus levels. Most significantly, the Council's authority had been diminished. Species were increasingly making their own decisions about foreign relations, bypassing the central government. The Council hadn't collapsed, but its power had been forever reduced. A year after humanity's departure, an unexpected request arrived at Unity Station. A void swarm hive ship, larger than any previously encountered, had appeared near Council space. Initial projections suggested it could spawn enough smaller ships to overwhelm the Council's defenses within months. The Council's request was formal and respectful. They asked humanity to provide tactical consultation, temporary, limited, with full compensation and no strings attached. President Davis reviewed the request with her cabinet. The debate was intense. "They're desperate," Secretary of Defense Charles Wright observed. "This is exactly the kind of existential threat they mentioned in their last message. Do we owe them anything?" asked Secretary of State Margaret Foster. "They tried to subjugate us." "We don't owe them," Helen agreed. "But this isn't about what we owe. It's about what kind of people we want to be." The decision was made to send a small advisory team, not a commitment to rejoin, not a military deployment, just advisors who could help the Council develop effective tactics against this new threat. Admiral Ryan Foster volunteered to lead the mission personally. He arrived at Council military headquarters 3 weeks later, with a team of 5 human tactical officers. Fleet Commander Veloth met them personally. "Admiral Foster, thank you for coming." "Let's be clear about something," Ryan said. "We're here to help with this specific threat. When it's resolved, we leave. This doesn't change humanity's status as independent." "Understood." Completely understood. The collaboration was strange at first. Council officers weren't used to the human style of rapid brainstorming and creative problem-solving. Human advisors weren't used to the rigid council chain of command. But slowly they found a rhythm. Ryan studied the swarm hive ship data and recognized the problem immediately. You can't fight this thing using standard tactics. It's too big and too well defended. You need to think asymmetrically. Explain, Veloth requested. The hive ship is designed to defend against frontal assault, but what if you don't attack it directly? What if you target its spawn ships as they emerge? Keep them from reaching critical mass. The hive itself is powerful but slow. If you can prevent it from building a fleet around itself, it becomes vulnerable. That would require perfect coordination and rapid response. Yes, which is what your species excel at. You're better at coordination than humans ever were. Use that strength. The battle plan came together over the next week. It wasn't a human plan or a council plan, but something new. Human creativity combined with council precision. When the operation launched, Ryan watched from the command center as council forces executed the strategy flawlessly. The battle lasted 6 hours. The hive ship, unable to build its protective fleet, was isolated and destroyed. Council casualties were surprisingly light. Veloth turned to Ryan when it was over. Thank you. You're welcome. My team will be leaving tomorrow, I know. But I want you to understand something. The council has changed. What happened with humanity taught us hard lessons. We're not the same organization we were. Ryan nodded. I hope that's true. For your sake and for the galaxy's. He returned to Unity Station having fulfilled humanity's commitment. The council had faced an existential threat. Humanity had helped. The debt, such as it was, had been paid. Sophie met him in the docking bay. How was it? Strange. They're trying to change, I think. Whether they'll succeed is another question. Do you think we'll ever rejoin them? Ryan looked out the viewport at the busy station. At the human ships moving freely through space without council oversight. At the independence humanity had fought so hard to maintain. Maybe someday. But if it happens, it'll be because both sides want it. Not because one side needs it or the other demands it. That's the only way it could work. Years passed. The council slowly rebuilt, learning to function without humanity as their safety net. They became more cautious, less arrogant, more willing to listen to smaller species. The crisis had humbled them in ways nothing else could. Humanity expanded into the frontier, establishing new colonies and forming new alliances. They maintained selective contact with council species, trading and cooperating when it served mutual interests. But they never rejoined the council, and they never regretted their decision to leave. The relationship between humanity and the council evolved into